Have you ever walked into a room where everyone wears a mask? Not a physical mask, but one of pretense, polished smiles, rehearsed words, hidden intentions. The world we navigate is built on these illusions. From childhood, we are taught that honesty, kindness, and integrity are the highest virtues. We are told that goodness will bring respect, admiration, and love. Yet step outside into reality, and you will find a contradiction. Society does not reward pure goodness, it exploits it. The people who thrive are not those who are most moral, but those who understand the game. Those who know when to bend the truth, when to act, when to hide. But what happens when someone refuses to play this game? Imagine a person who cannot lie, who does not manipulate, who does not protect themselves with layers of deception. This is Prince Myshkin, the so-called idiot in Dostoevsky's novel. A man of absolute sincerity, incapable of deceit, embodying pure goodness. Yet instead of being embraced as a moral ideal, he is mocked, pitied, and ultimately discarded by society. The same people who claim to admire kindness turn against him. He is used, manipulated, and betrayed. Not because he is evil, but because he is too good. The irony is cruel. Those who are truly honest and kind often find themselves isolated, misunderstood, or even destroyed. This is not just a fictional tragedy. History is filled with figures who, like Myshkin, were too sincere for the world they lived in. Socrates, whose relentless pursuit of truth made Athens uncomfortable, was sentenced to death. Jesus, the embodiment of love and forgiveness, was crucified by those who could not bear his presence. Gandhi, who stood for nonviolence, was assassinated by those who rejected his ideals. Even in modern times, whistleblowers, humanitarians, and idealists are often cast aside, not because they are wrong, but because they reveal uncomfortable truths. We say we cherish morality, yet we punish those who embody it too perfectly. But why? If society claims to value goodness, why does it always seem to destroy those who possess it in its purest form? The answer is not simple cruelty, it is fear. Pure goodness does not just challenge corruption, it exposes it. Those who live with masks cannot stand in the presence of one who wears none. Myshkin, Socrates, and Jesus did not just live differently, they held up a mirror to the world, forcing people to confront their own hypocrisy. And for that, they were rejected. This leads us to the most painful paradox of morality. If goodness is what we idealize, why do we reject those who embody it? Perhaps the true tragedy is not just that pure souls suffer, but that society itself is built in a way that ensures their suffering. But is this suffering inevitable, or does it reveal something deeper about the nature of morality itself? In this journey, we will explore why society turns against those who are truly good, why moral purity is often seen as a weakness, and whether goodness is truly a virtue or a curse. And so, let us step deeper into this paradox and examine the tragic fate of pure souls. The tragic fate of pure souls. Have you ever wondered why the world turns against those who embody pure goodness? Why do we celebrate kindness in words but reject it in action? Why do the people who live with sincerity, honesty, and virtue often meet the most tragic ends? Society claims to admire morality, yet when confronted with true innocence, it recoils. If goodness is the highest virtue, why does the world reject those who possess it in its purest form? To understand this contradiction, we must look at one of the most tragic figures in literature, Prince Myshkin. Dostoevsky's idiot is not foolish because he lacks intelligence. He is called an idiot because he does not conform to the silent rules of society. He refuses to deceive, refuses to manipulate, and refuses to see the world through the lens of self-interest. In a society governed by hidden agendas, Myshkin is an anomaly, one who cannot lie, who cannot act, who cannot betray. And yet, instead of being celebrated for his moral purity, he is ridiculed, used, and ultimately destroyed. But this is not just a fictional tragedy. It is a recurring theme in history, in philosophy, in human nature itself. Myshkin's fate echoes the fate of countless others who live by truth and sincerity, only to be met with hostility and rejection. Socrates, the unyielding seeker of wisdom, was sentenced to death. His crime? Asking too many questions, forcing people to examine their own ignorance. He did not commit any violent act, nor did he break any law, but his presence unsettled the powerful. His refusal to flatter, to conform, to accept convenient falsehoods made him an enemy of the state. And so, rather than face the discomfort of self-examination, Athens chose to silence him. The same pattern repeats with Jesus Christ, the embodiment of love and forgiveness. He did not seek power, nor did he wage war, yet he was crucified as a threat to the establishment. His message was simple: compassion, humility, and truth. But the world could not tolerate him because he was a mirror reflecting the corruption and hypocrisy of those in power. Even as he was nailed to the cross, his presence continued to expose the flaws of the system that condemned him. Gandhi, who preached nonviolence, was assassinated. Martin Luther King Jr., who fought for justice through peace, was shot. Even in modern times, whistleblowers, humanitarians, and idealists often face exile, imprisonment, or death. Not because they are criminals, but because they reveal uncomfortable truths. We say we cherish morality, yet we punish those who embody it too perfectly. But why? Why does the world reject pure souls? The answer is not just cruelty, it is fear. True goodness does not just challenge corruption, it exposes it. Those who live with masks cannot stand in the presence of one who wears none. Myshkin, Socrates, and Jesus did not just live differently. They held up a mirror to the world, forcing people to confront their own hypocrisy. And for that, they were rejected. This leads us to a painful paradox. If goodness is what we idealize, why do we reject those who embody it? Why is moral purity so often seen as weakness? Perhaps the true tragedy is not just that pure souls suffer, but that society itself is built in a way that ensures their suffering. But is this suffering inevitable? Must pure souls always be sacrificed at the altar of a corrupt world? Or is there another side to this paradox? In this journey, we will explore what society truly values, why cunning often triumphs over virtue, and whether there is a hidden power in the very goodness that seems so fragile. And so, let us step into the next revelation, what the world truly rewards, and why it is not what we claim to admire. The world does not reward goodness, it rewards power. Have you ever noticed that the most celebrated figures in history are rarely the most moral? Instead, they are the ones who understand the mechanics of power. While we are taught that goodness is the highest virtue, the reality is far different. The world does not reward those who are purely good. It rewards those who know how to navigate power, influence, and control. Those who act with sincerity, who refuse to manipulate, who live by truth alone often find themselves trampled underfoot. But why is this the case? To answer this, we must look at how societies have always functioned. Civilization is not built on pure morality. It is built on hierarchy, survival, and control. From ancient times to modern politics, those who rise to the top are rarely the kindest souls. They are those who understand when to play the game, when to compromise, when to conceal their true thoughts, and when to exert force. History does not glorify moral perfection, it glorifies those who win. Take Niccolo Machiavelli, one of history's most misunderstood philosophers. In The Prince, he argues that rulers must prioritize power over virtue if they wish to survive. He famously asks whether it is better to be loved or feared. His answer: it is safer to be feared. Not because fear is desirable, but because people are unreliable in their affections. A ruler who relies on goodness alone will be betrayed the moment it is convenient for others. But one who understands fear and respect will maintain control. Machiavelli does not advocate cruelty. He merely points out the harsh reality that morality without strength is powerless. We can see this philosophy in action throughout history. Julius Caesar was not the most moral man, but he understood loyalty and strategy, securing his rule over Rome. Napoleon Bonaparte was not a saint, but he reshaped Europe through sheer force of will. Even modern leaders who claim to represent virtue, whether in politics, business, or media, often thrive not because of their morality, but because they know how to wield power. Those who lack this understanding, who rely purely on honesty and sincerity, are often swept aside. But what about democracy? Doesn't modern society value justice and fairness? In theory, yes. In practice, power still governs everything. Look at any election. The most truthful candidate does not always win. The most persuasive one does. The one who understands rhetoric, influence, and perception. In business, the hardest worker does not always succeed. The one who understands negotiation and networking does. Even in social circles, the kindest person is not always the most respected. It is often the one who commands presence and influence. This is why figures like Socrates, Jesus, and Myshkin suffer. They refuse to compromise. They do not play the game. And in a world where influence determines survival, they are seen as weak, naive, or even dangerous. They remind people of the uncomfortable truth that morality alone does not guarantee success, that society's values are often hypocritical, and for that, they are cast out. But does this mean morality is meaningless? Is goodness truly a weakness? Or is there a hidden strength in those who refuse to conform to the game of power? In the next section, we will explore the paradox of moral strength, the hidden power of those who stand by truth, even when the world turns against them. The hidden power of the truly good. Have you ever met someone who refuses to lie, even when it would make their life easier? Someone who stands by their principles, no matter the cost? At first glance, these people may seem powerless, doomed to be taken advantage of in a world that thrives on deception. Yet history reveals something astonishing. Those who hold on to truth, who refuse to bend, often leave the greatest impact on humanity. They may suffer in their own time, but their legacy outlasts empires. What is it about moral purity that makes it so powerful? The answer lies in the paradox of truth and resistance. Those who live with masks may navigate society more easily, but they rarely inspire lasting change. The ones who refuse to wear a mask, who remain unshakable in their beliefs, become forces of transformation, often without intending to. Their very existence challenges the world around them. Take Socrates, who could have saved himself by conforming, by flattering the Athenian authorities, by choosing silence. Instead, he chose death over falsehood, and in doing so, he became immortal. His ideas shaped the very foundations of Western philosophy. Jesus could have aligned himself with political power, but he chose to stand by truth, even when it led to his crucifixion. Today, his teachings influence billions. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. Each of them rejected the game of power, yet they changed the course of history. Their strength did not come from manipulation or force. It came from the unwavering power of conviction. But why does this strength often go unrecognized in its own time? Because it threatens the status quo. Those who benefit from deception fear those who refuse to engage in it. A person who cannot be bribed, controlled, or swayed is unpredictable. And unpredictability is dangerous to any system built on control. This is why truly good individuals are often dismissed as naive or even dangerous. Yet there is a hidden advantage to moral purity. It exposes the world for what it truly is. Prince Myshkin in The Idiot does not just suffer, he reveals. His mere presence forces others to confront their own hypocrisy. Socrates did not simply teach, he forced Athens to look at itself in the mirror. Jesus did not just preach love, he exposed corruption in religious and political institutions. When someone refuses to lie, it forces those around them to ask why they do. This is why those who are truly good become symbols, even if they are cast out in their time. The world may not immediately reward them, but it remembers them. Their influence grows long after their suffering ends. Moral purity is not weakness. It is a form of resistance that outlasts the strongest rulers and the most cunning manipulators. But this raises an even deeper question. If the world eventually recognizes the value of true goodness, why does it still reject it in the present moment? Why do societies continue to punish those who challenge them, even when history proves that these individuals were right? In the next section, we will explore why the world resists truth and why deception remains the foundation of civilization itself. Why society resists truth and clings to illusion. Have you ever wondered why, despite centuries of progress, society still rewards deception while punishing those who tell the truth? If history repeatedly proves that honesty and moral conviction shape the world, why does society continue to suppress it? The answer is unsettling. Truth is not just inconvenient, it is destabilizing. Civilization, at its core, is built on a fragile web of illusions. Social structures, political systems, and cultural norms exist not because they are inherently just, but because they provide stability. The moment someone exposes these illusions, the entire system trembles. Those in power, whether in government, business, or even everyday social circles, depend on maintaining these narratives. And when someone refuses to conform, refuses to play along, they are not simply an outsider, they are a threat. Consider how deeply deception is woven into our daily lives. We teach children to be honest, yet expect them to learn social lies. Say thank you even if you don't mean it. Smile even if you're upset. Pretend to like the gift you received. In the workplace, employees are expected to appear loyal even when they secretly disagree with company decisions. Politicians gain votes not through truth, but through promises they rarely intend to keep. Even in personal relationships, people often present carefully curated versions of themselves rather than their raw, unfiltered reality. Those who refuse to participate in these deceptions, people like Socrates, Jesus, or Prince Myshkin, disrupt the entire system. They remind others of their own compromises. Socrates did not just question Athenian democracy, he forced its citizens to question themselves. His death was not merely an act of political suppression, but a symbolic rejection of the discomfort he caused. Jesus' teachings on love and humility were not controversial because they were radical in theory, but because they exposed the hypocrisy of those who claim to be righteous. This pattern repeats throughout history. Whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange reveal uncomfortable truths about governments, and instead of being praised, they are exiled. Activists who expose corruption are labeled as troublemakers, not because they are wrong, but because their revelations threaten the stability of the system. Society does not fear truth because it is false. It fears truth because it is powerful. But this creates an even deeper paradox. If the world resists truth, how does progress ever happen? How do moral revolutions occur if society is built to suppress them? The answer lies in the very nature of truth itself. It does not need immediate acceptance to endure. It simply needs to be spoken. Throughout history, those who stood for truth did not always see the impact of their actions in their lifetime. Socrates died in disgrace, yet his teachings became the foundation of Western thought. Jesus was executed as a criminal, yet his words transformed billions. Galileo was persecuted for his scientific discoveries, but his insights became fundamental truths. Even those who are condemned today often shape the future in ways that cannot yet be seen. This is the uncomfortable truth about moral purity. It is always met with resistance, yet it always endures. The world rejects it not because it is weak, but because it is too strong. But this raises a final question. If standing for truth is so difficult and society resists it so fiercely, is it even worth it? Or does survival require compromise? In the next section, we will explore the cost of living with integrity and whether it is possible to balance truth with survival in an imperfect world. The cost of living with integrity, sacrifice or strength. Have you ever noticed that the people who live with the most integrity often face the greatest struggles? Those who refuse to deceive, who stand by their morals no matter the cost, frequently find themselves outcast, ridiculed, or even destroyed. And yet, paradoxically, they are also the ones who shape history, inspire change, and leave behind legacies that outlive their oppressors. So is living with integrity a path to suffering, Or is it the ultimate form of strength? To understand this, we must first recognize that society does not run on truth. It runs on agreement. People do not seek truth because it is right. They seek what is convenient, what benefits them, what allows them to maintain their place in the social order. This is why those who challenge the status quo are punished, not because they are wrong, but because they disrupt the delicate balance of power, comfort, and illusion. Integrity, then, is not just about honesty. It is about defying the forces that demand conformity. Consider the fate of the great moral figures of history. Socrates could have saved his own life by renouncing his teachings, but he chose death over betrayal of his beliefs. Jesus could have retreated into obscurity rather than challenge the religious elite, but he chose crucifixion over silence. Gandhi could have compromised with British rule, yet he faced imprisonment and assassination. In each case, these figures refused to conform, and they suffered for it. But what did they gain? Their deaths were not the end of their influence, they were the beginning. Their suffering became the price of transformation, their sacrifice the foundation for change. Yet we do not have to look only at historical figures to see this principle at work. In everyday life, those who hold to their values, who refuse to lie to get ahead, who do not betray others for personal gain, may seem to struggle in the short term. They may lose jobs, friendships, or opportunities, but over time, their reputation, their inner strength, and their unwavering character become their greatest assets. They become unshakable. Unlike those who constantly shift to fit the moment, a person of integrity stands firm, and in doing so, they gain something more valuable than power or comfort. They gain self-respect. But does this mean that living with integrity requires suffering? Not necessarily. The key lies in understanding that while society may punish truth in the moment, it always rewards it in the long run. Those who stand for what is right may face short-term loss, but they build something far greater, an unbreakable foundation of trust, respect, and meaning. They may not always receive wealth or power, but they gain something that cannot be taken away, a legacy. However, this leads us to a deeper question. If integrity is ultimately a strength, why do so many people choose deception instead? Why do the majority prefer to play the game rather than risk standing apart? The answer is not just fear, it is survival. In the next section, we will explore the psychology of deception, the evolutionary reasons behind it, and why so many people find it easier to wear a mask than to reveal their true selves. If integrity is strength, why does the world still favor illusion? Let's dive deeper into this mystery. The psychology of deception, why we wear masks. Have you ever wondered why people lie even when the truth would set them free? Why do we instinctively hide our weaknesses, mask our true intentions, and manipulate reality to suit our needs? It is easy to dismiss deception as mere dishonesty, but the truth is far more complex. Deception is not just a tool for survival, it is woven into the very fabric of human nature. It is not simply a moral failing, it is an evolutionary necessity. From an evolutionary perspective, deception has always been a means of survival. Animals use camouflage to blend into their environment, predators disguise their intentions to catch prey, and even infants learn early on how to cry strategically to get attention. In the wild, those who can manipulate perception have a higher chance of survival. For humans, deception evolved not just as a means of physical survival, but as a tool for navigating the complexities of social life. One of the most powerful examples of this is found in the concept of Machiavellian intelligence. The idea that human intelligence evolved not just for problem solving, but for social manipulation. The ability to read others, predict their behavior, and adjust one's actions accordingly is what allowed early humans to thrive in cooperative, yet competitive groups. Deception became a fundamental part of human interaction, not because people wanted to be dishonest, but because it was necessary to maintain power, influence, and stability. Even today, the most successful individuals, whether in politics, business, or social circles, are not always those who are the most skilled or intelligent, but those who understand human psychology. They know when to be brutally honest and when to conceal the truth. They know when to appear confident, even if they are uncertain. They know when to manipulate emotions to gain favor. This is not always done out of malice. Sometimes it is a simple adaptation to a world that does not reward raw honesty. Psychologists call this impression management, the art of controlling how one is perceived. Every day we engage in small deceptions to fit into different social roles. We smile when we are sad. We nod in agreement when we disagree. We say, "I'm fine," when we are struggling. Society demands that we play our part, and to refuse is often to face isolation. In this way, deception is not just a tactic. It is a requirement for functioning in human society. But if deception is so deeply ingrained in human nature, does this mean that honesty is a weakness? Is it possible to live authentically in a world that thrives on illusion? The answer is not simple, because it depends on the kind of honesty one embraces. There is a difference between blind honesty, revealing everything without consideration, and strategic authenticity, knowing when to be truthful and when to remain silent. Throughout history, those who mastered the balance between truth and perception were not only able to survive, but to change the world. Marcus Aurelius, for example, upheld Stoic principles, but understood when to exercise restraint in his leadership. Nietzsche, though a radical truth seeker, knew that society was not ready for all of his ideas in his lifetime. Even spiritual figures like the Buddha presented their wisdom in ways that would be most palatable to their followers. So the question is not whether deception is necessary, it is. The question is whether we can exist in a world of deception while remaining true to ourselves. Can we navigate a world of masks without losing our own face? Can we play the game without becoming consumed by it? In the next section, we will explore the delicate balance between authenticity and strategy. How do we live truthfully without becoming martyrs? How do we maintain integrity in a world that demands compromise? The answer may determine whether we are doomed to be used by society or whether we can rise above it. The cost of absolute honesty when truth becomes a curse. Have you ever met someone who speaks with complete honesty, no matter the consequences? Someone who refuses to sugarcoat reality, who cannot pretend, who exposes uncomfortable truths without hesitation? While we often claim to value honesty, the reality is that pure, unfiltered truth is rarely welcomed. Instead of being admired, such people are often rejected, ostracized, or even destroyed. The paradox of honesty is this: the more truthful you are, the more the world resists you. To understand why, we must recognize a fundamental aspect of human psychology. People do not want the truth, they want comfort. The mind craves stability, certainty, and affirmation. Harsh truths disrupt this stability. They force us to confront uncomfortable realities about ourselves, our society, and our beliefs. The most dangerous people, then, are not those who lie, but those who tell the truth too loudly. This is why figures like Socrates, Jesus, and Giordano Bruno suffered tragic fates. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth of Athens, not because he was a criminal, but because he questioned authority and exposed the ignorance of the elite. Jesus was crucified, not for any wrongdoing, but because his message threatened the religious and political order of his time. Giordano Bruno, a philosopher and scientist, was burned at the stake for proposing that the universe was infinite, an idea that challenged the dogma of the Catholic Church. Their crime was not evil, it was honesty. And honesty, when it shakes the foundations of power, is the most dangerous weapon of all. This is why history has repeatedly punished those who tell the truth too soon or too directly. Most people do not want enlightenment. They want reassurance. They do not seek wisdom. They seek validation. And those who refuse to provide it are cast aside. But this does not mean that honesty is futile. Truth has the power to liberate, but only when it is given in the right way, at the right time, to the right people. Consider the difference between a person who recklessly speaks the truth and one who carefully chooses when and how to reveal it. The former may be silenced before their message can spread, while the latter may live long enough to change the world. This is why true wisdom is not just about knowing the truth, but knowing how to deliver it. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood this dilemma well. He argued that the greatest truths are unbearable for most people, and that those who reveal them without caution are doomed to isolation. His book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, describes the struggle of a man who discovers profound wisdom, but realizes that society is not ready to hear it. This reflects a painful reality. Even when truth is offered as a gift, people will often reject it if they are not prepared to receive it. This leads us to an important question. Is it possible to be completely honest and still survive in society? If the fate of truth-tellers is exile, imprisonment, or death, does this mean that honesty is a curse? The answer lies not in abandoning truth, but in mastering the art of revelation. The world does not reward raw truth. It rewards strategic wisdom. If one wishes to change society, they must learn when to speak and when to remain silent, not out of cowardice, but out of understanding. A surgeon does not use a sword to heal, he uses a scalpel. Likewise, those who seek to spread truth must do so with precision, or risk being cut down before their wisdom can take root. In the next section, we will explore how truth can be wielded as a force for transformation rather than destruction. How can one live honestly without being crushed by society? How can we reveal truth in a way that enlightens rather than alienates? The answer may determine whether honesty is truly a curse or the key to ultimate freedom. The art of speaking truth without destruction. Have you ever felt the urge to reveal a hard truth but hesitated, knowing the reaction would be hostile? Have you ever watched someone speak with brutal honesty, only to be met with scorn or rejection? If absolute truth leads to suffering, does this mean deception is necessary for survival? Or is there a way to be completely honest without being cast aside? Throughout history, the wisest figures have understood that truth is a weapon, and like any weapon, it must be wielded with skill. A fool blurts out truths without care and is swiftly silenced. A wise person, however, understands when and how to reveal truth so that it transforms rather than destroys. This is the difference between Socrates and Plato, between Giordano Bruno and Galileo. Some were burned at the stake for their ideas, while others changed the world by choosing their battles carefully. Consider Galileo Galilei, who discovered that the earth revolved around the sun, a truth that contradicted the powerful religious doctrines of his time. Unlike Bruno, who confronted the church head-on and paid with his life, Galileo chose to retract his statements publicly while secretly continuing his work. He understood that survival was necessary for his ideas to spread. Was this dishonesty, or was it wisdom? This dilemma is not limited to history. Even today, whistleblowers, reformers, and visionaries face persecution when they challenge the status quo too directly. The world is not kind to those who disrupt illusions, yet every great change begins with someone willing to do so. The key is to understand how to introduce truth without immediate rejection. Laozi, the ancient Chinese philosopher, taught that truth must be given gently, like water eroding stone. A sudden, forceful impact shatters, but steady pressure transforms. This is why the most effective teachers, philosophers, and leaders present truth not as an attack, but as an invitation. Instead of condemning illusions outright, they guide people toward discovery, allowing them to see for themselves. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus also understood this. He warned that forcing truth upon someone who is not ready for it is like feeding a sick stomach rich food. It will only cause pain. True wisdom is not in shouting the truth, but in knowing when a mind is prepared to receive it. Only when people are ready to see will they truly open their eyes. This is why the most profound truths are often wrapped in stories, parables, and allegories. Jesus spoke in parables not to obscure truth, but to make it accessible. The Buddha used riddles and metaphors so that wisdom would unfold naturally in the listener's mind. Even Socrates, rather than declaring truths outright, used the method of questioning, leading others to discover the answers for themselves. So how can one speak truth without suffering the fate of those who were too honest too soon? The answer lies in understanding human nature. People are not hostile to truth itself. They are hostile to sudden change. When we challenge someone's beliefs too aggressively, they will resist, not because they are evil or ignorant, but because they feel threatened. The key to influencing others is not to attack their illusions, but to help them dissolve on their own. This means that the greatest power does not lie in mere honesty, but in persuasive wisdom. It is not enough to know the truth. One must also know how to share it. To be effective, truth must be spoken in a way that resonates, that does not provoke immediate rejection, but invites deeper thought. The goal is not to shock, but to awaken. So, is it possible to be honest without being destroyed? The answer is yes, but only if honesty is combined with understanding, patience, and strategy. The world does not reward reckless truth-tellers. It rewards those who know how to reveal truth with precision. In the next section, we will explore the final paradox. If truth is meant to be shared carefully, does this mean that deception has its place in wisdom? Can concealment sometimes serve a greater good? Or is all deception a form of corruption? This is where we confront the most difficult question of all: the fine line between truth and manipulation. Have you ever wondered whether a small lie could serve a greater good? Have you ever withheld the full truth, not out of malice, but because you believed the person in front of you was not ready to hear it? If honesty is a virtue, why do even the wisest minds sometimes choose to conceal? This question takes us to the heart of an ancient dilemma. Is deception always evil, or can it be an instrument of wisdom? If absolute truth leads to suffering, and if careful truth-telling is an art, then what role does concealment play in human interaction? Throughout history, great leaders, philosophers, and spiritual teachers have all faced this dilemma. Even Socrates, who was devoted to truth, did not hand out knowledge freely. He asked questions, allowing his students to arrive at conclusions themselves. Was this manipulation, or was it wisdom? Consider the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna, the divine guide, does not reveal the full truth to Arjuna immediately. Instead, he unfolds wisdom layer by layer, revealing deeper insights only when Arjuna is ready to understand them. Similarly, in Plato's Republic, the idea of the noble lie is introduced, a falsehood told to maintain social order. While this may seem contradictory, it suggests that sometimes truth is not about blunt honesty, but about revealing what is necessary at the right time. This concept is not about deception for personal gain, but about a higher level of discernment. The understanding that truth, if revealed too suddenly, can be destructive rather than transformative. This is why Zen masters often use paradoxes to teach, why Sufi poets speak in metaphors, and why religious texts are filled with symbols rather than direct proclamations. Truth is a seed. It must be planted in the right soil at the right time. But where is the boundary between wisdom and manipulation? If withholding truth can be justified, how do we distinguish between doing so for wisdom versus for control? This is the very distinction that separates the sage from the deceiver. Manipulation is when truth is distorted for self-interest, while wisdom is when truth is carefully revealed for the benefit of others. A philosopher withholds truth until the student is ready. A tyrant withholds truth to maintain control. A doctor does not immediately tell a terminally ill patient their fate if they are not mentally prepared, but a con artist conceals truth to exploit. The intent defines the act. In Buddhism, this concept is known as upaya, skillful means. It is the idea that wisdom must be adapted to the level of understanding of the person receiving it. If a child asks a deep philosophical question, do we burden them with an answer beyond their grasp? Or do we offer a simplified truth that prepares them for deeper understanding later? Even in psychology, research shows that the human mind resists direct confrontation with uncomfortable truths. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we are not yet ready to face. He warned that if truth is forced upon an unprepared mind, it will be rejected with hostility rather than integrated with wisdom. So does this mean that concealment is necessary? Or does it risk becoming a slippery slope toward deception? This is the paradox. Truth must be protected, but never corrupted. To navigate this balance, one must cultivate both honesty and patience. The goal is not to control others, but to ensure that truth serves its highest purpose: transformation, not destruction. And this brings us to the final question. If society punishes pure goodness, if honesty must be wielded with care, and if even truth itself must sometimes be concealed, then what, ultimately, is the path of wisdom? How does one exist in a world built on illusions without becoming part of the illusion? In the final section, we will explore the ultimate resolution of this paradox, the path of the awakened mind, the one who sees through all illusions but is not bound by them. Let us now step into the highest level of understanding. Transcending the illusion, the path of the awakened mind. Have you ever felt like you were playing a role in a script you never agreed to? Have you ever questioned whether the person you present to the world is truly you, or just a mask shaped by societal expectations? If so, then you have already begun to see through the illusion. Throughout this journey, we have explored the tragic fate of pure souls, the paradox of goodness, the fine line between truth and manipulation, and the way society reacts to those who refuse to conform. But where does this leave us? If goodness is punished, if truth must be wielded carefully, and if society is built in illusions, then how can one exist in such a world without being consumed by it? The answer lies in transcendence, not escape, not surrender, but a higher way of being. To live in the world without being of the world, to see through the illusion but not be bound by it. This is the path of the awakened mind, the one who understands the game, but no longer plays it out of fear or obligation. This idea is not new. It is found in the teachings of Lao Tzu, Buddha, Jesus, Rumi, and countless other sages who walked the earth before us. They did not reject society, nor did they blindly conform to it. Instead, they mastered the art of moving through it with awareness. They became the quiet force that influenced the world, not by fighting it directly, but by rising above it. Take the example of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, the enlightened being who sees through the illusion of self and society, but chooses to remain in the world to guide others. This is the highest wisdom, neither complete withdrawal nor blind participation, but a conscious existence. This path requires three fundamental shifts in perception: understanding the game but refusing to be its pawn. The awakened mind sees the illusions of power, of status, of social validation, but does not fall victim to them. They recognize that much of what people chase in life is based on fear and conditioning rather than true fulfillment. This is why sages do not seek approval or fear rejection. They know that praise and criticism are two sides of the same illusion. Practicing detached engagement. This does not mean apathy, nor does it mean isolation. It means engaging with the world fully, but without attachment to its rewards or punishments. The awakened person helps others, but not for validation. They speak the truth, but without needing it to be accepted. They act, but they are not controlled by outcomes. This is what Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita. Perform your duty without attachment to results. It is what the Stoics call amor fati, love of fate, the ability to embrace life as it comes without resistance or desperation. Realizing that freedom comes from within the world will never be free of illusions. There will always be deception, manipulation, and injustice. But the awakened mind is not seeking to change the world before first changing itself. The greatest revolution is internal. When you are no longer controlled by fear, by societal conditioning, or by the need for approval, you become free in a way that no external force can take away. This is why in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is within you." It is not found in external perfection, in the collapse of corruption, or in the destruction of illusions. It is found in awakening to the truth within yourself. But there is one last paradox we must confront. If society punishes pure goodness, and if wisdom requires a balance of truth and concealment, then does this mean morality itself is an illusion? Is goodness a weakness, or is it something beyond mere social constructs? Nietzsche argued that morality, as society defines it, is often used as a tool of control. But he also acknowledged that beyond societal morality, there exists a deeper kind of virtue, a personal code of honor that is not dictated by laws or customs, but by an individual's highest understanding. This is why the awakened mind does not conform to society's shallow definitions of good and evil. They do not seek approval for their actions, nor do they fear condemnation. They act in alignment with a truth that is beyond dogma, beyond external rewards, beyond recognition. This is the final step in the journey: to live with integrity but without naivety, to embody goodness but with wisdom, to move through the world but not be moved by it. And so we return to the question we began with. What happens to those who are truly good in a world that does not reward goodness? The answer is simple. They transcend it. They stop seeking validation, stop fearing rejection, and stop trying to force the world to change. Instead, they become the silent revolution, the living embodiment of truth, moving through the illusion but never being trapped by it. This is the path of the awakened mind, not the one who escapes the world, but the one who rises above it. And so we have reached the end of our journey. But in truth, this is not an end. It is an invitation to see through the illusion, to move beyond the contradictions, and to step into a life of awareness, freedom, and quiet power. The question is, are you ready?